right, welcome to today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader, where we dive deep on all things leader related to leading yourself and leading others. I'm John Laredo, your host. Today with a great guest, I've got Howard Berndorf, who is the director on the board for Adamis Pharmaceuticals, as well as a business consultant at Vision Clinical Research. Howard, it is great to have you on the show.
Good to be with you, John.
Yeah. I know we had a really nice conversation just earlier about leadership. There's a lot I'd love to pick your brain on. And we've got a lot of, obviously, leaders in the audience who are always curious to hear stories and insight about what goes into great leadership. And I know you've shared that you've been impacted by a couple of really what you consider to be real leaders. Tell me a little bit about that. What is a real leader? And tell me about your experience with these types of people.
Well, I had a professor in college, and I had undertaken an independent study in science. It was a biochemistry lab, and I really wasn't clear what I was doing. And this professor sort of noticed that I was a little lost, and he took me under his wing and really went through all of the things that I wasn't quite understanding, that I had some knowledge of, but he really sat down with me and made it very clear and made me understand things that I should have known by then, but I really didn't, and was too embarrassed to say anything to most people. And I'll never forget this guy, because he, to me, was a real leader in education, because for him to do that, it really made me love science, and it really changed my view on what I wanted to do with my life. And it really pushed me towards becoming involved in science for business.
Wow. And that's interesting, because most leaders don't necessarily do that. They don't take that approach. Yet this is somebody who really took the extra time with you and tapped in ultimately to something that you're very passionate about. Why do you think some people just don't? That seems like it's a pretty rare trait. Is that right? Do you find that?
Absolutely. I don't think that most people do things like that. His name was John Collishaw. He's still out there, I believe, at the college.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an exceptional person. I don't think that most leaders take that level of input into the people that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for me, that was exceptional, because it really changed my life.
Yeah.
It really did.
Well, it's interesting. That sounds to me like a transformational leader, which I've always looked at. Those are the people that tap into your heart and your head, versus a transactional leader that's just more about, so to speak, your feet and your hands. This person really transformed your life.
It was more of a heart thing than a knowledge thing, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned another individual that was in your mind a real leader. Tell us about that.
Well, I think his name is Brooke Byers, and he was with the venture capital firm Kleiner. He is with the firm Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield and Byers. They are one of the preeminent venture capital firms in the country. And this was way back when he first started, and he came down to look at our deal that we had given them, a 6-page business plan, after going out and buying a book called How to Start Your Own Business. So it was pretty bad. But he has affected my life. He's been with me now in 6 different companies over almost 40 years, and has always been there for me. He's just been an amazing leader and an amazing friend. I mean, obviously we became friends over time. And when I think of people that have really touched my life with leadership issues, he's the top of the list.
Wow. What did he do specifically? I'm interested in that. So how did he touch your life? How did he leave you better than he found you, so to speak?
Well, for example, we're starting this company. I'm the first employee and the only employee. I'm sitting in an office with a desk and a chair and nothing else. A little lab is in there, but there's nothing in it. So there were all these things that needed to be done that I had never done before, and like set up. They gave me a check for $300,000, even though we had asked for $178,000. As I said, that's the first and last time I ever got more money than I asked for. And they just handed me this check and they said, go set up bank accounts and go do this and that. All these things I had never done before, but they trusted me and I went and I did them and they all came out okay.
That's
So
great.
really, it gave me a sense of confidence that I could do these things that I'd never done before
Yeah.
and that they trusted me to do these things.
Yeah. Did they know
which
that you had not done them before?
I assume so. I don't think they could have not known.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. I mean, a lot of becoming a great leader is stepping outside your comfort zone, and it's developing and gaining confidence from things that you've done that you hadn't done before, but you've done them successfully, which that sounds like was the case. And I think one of the best things a leader can do is put their people in that position to do that, to give them, it's almost like you're lending them confidence when they were so confident handing you that check and said, hey, go do this and this. It almost put in your, my guess, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but almost probably infused some confidence in you because they were just so comfortable with that.
Absolutely. And it's like their leaders, their leadership, they were passing that leadership on to me because ultimately I would end up doing the same thing to other people over the course of my time.
Yeah.
In various companies. I had one guy that, I had a number of management people that just would follow me from one company to the next company that I would start because they wanted to be involved in it and they wanted to be with me. And I thought that was amazing. Well, I didn't expect it.
Yeah, and that says a lot. I mean, that's what leadership is about. When you influence somebody, the way that those two individuals influenced you, the same way if they came to you and had something else that they were doing that they wanted you to be a part of, it's more about the person than it is even the project sometimes. And it sounds like the same with you. Now, you've had a very successful career. You've taken, since back in the 70s, 4 companies you started up in biotech very, very successfully. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, that's a really unique background, lots of success. What were some of the major challenges that you had? How'd you navigate through that so well?
Well, always the biggest challenge in startups is money. 90% of a CEO's time is spent on finding money and making sure that you have enough money for now and for the next year. And then the second you do that, you're looking at the following year, the year after that. That is your biggest challenge, is raising money and making sure you have enough money. And so most of my time was spent traveling, giving presentations about the company to potential investors. Yeah. That was my biggest challenge, was keeping the bank account full.
And what's your advice? I mean, there are a lot of people on listening to this that are in startup mode or thinking about that, or maybe they're on their second one or whatnot. What's your advice for having done that so well? Because I understand where you're coming from, and having sat through a lot of presentations and whatnot. I mean, there's a wide variety of skill sets and everything. What goes into raising capital really well?
Well, I always used this list of 5 attributes that I would say that I thought that a startup needed. One of them had to do with money, but the rest of them was our technical excellence. In other words, in my mind, the technology you're starting up should be proprietary, should be patented or trade secret, for example, because you want to make sure that others can't come in and follow you immediately and try and take over your business. So for me, that was very important, having a proprietary technology and technical excellence. Second was financing, which we just talked about. The financing has to be reasonable, though. Investor can't come in and take 80% of the company in the first round of financing. It's got to be done in reasonable equity chunks so that you have some to give the employees and that you have more to follow on investments.
Mm-hmm.
The third is a strategic focus. You don't know how many times I've seen companies that are trying to do too many things. You have to be able to narrow your focus down to one or two things that are the crux of your business and that you really want to stay focused on and not divert your attention to other things. A sense of urgency is key. You want to get this done as quickly as possible. If that means breaking some rules, so be it. I mean, I was always one that was, I would try and navigate the rules because I was in a hurry. I'm not talking about anything illegal, but totally, getting things done quickly, having that sense of urgency was very important. And finally, having experience management. You don't want to go and hire somebody for your marketing job that's never done it before. Mm-hmm. You need to have people that not only have the experience, but also can fit with the team. It's all about team building and having a good team that work with one another well and can get the job done ultimately with that sense of urgency.
Mm-hmm. Well, I first of all, I love that. Great points there. And I to your last point there with teams, I see a lot of leaders that do two things that stick out. One, that don't have a really strategic focus. The business is all over the place, or the leader's all over the place. They don't really not know where their sweet spot is, and they're trying to do too much. And there's a couple of organizations that come to mind where that's been the problem. It's almost you scratch your head trying to think, okay, what is it that you're doing, and what do people know you for, what do you want them to know you for? They can't know you for 12 different things. But the other thing you mentioned is the experience management and building a team that really works. How often do you see leaders that don't know how to do this very well? In other words, they don't necessarily know where their unique ability is and where they need to hire or build a team around them. Do you see that as a problem a lot?
I have seen that, no question. It's been a while since I've been in the active community, so I can't say that I've seen it recently. But there are definitely examples of that where people bite off more than they can chew and don't stay focused on what they should be. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that those companies make it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think there becomes, there's always the exception, but for the most part, that is a real detriment to success.
Yeah, exactly. I think I see that as a sign of a leader, I think a weak leader that is trying to also do everything him or herself, and everything runs through them. Decisions, everything, ideas, everything needs to come through them, in which case that's the bottleneck of the company and they just can't move fast enough.
That's absolutely the truth. And that's happened. I've seen that many times. Mm-hmm. I always thought that one of the first employees I should hire is legal, and people didn't really understand that. The VCs would say, "What are you doing hiring a lawyer so soon? I mean, maybe you'll need one in the future, but you can always use outside counsel." But I always found that having an in-house lawyer at the early stages of the company was really helpful to me and the company. Not only did he know all of the legal issues of the company and could help us on those, but he was always he was sort of like a consigliere. He would be who I would bounce my questions off of and my issues off of. And I used the same guy, followed me to all four companies. He was a PhD chemist from MIT and a lawyer with one of the biggest patent firms. And I was able to recruit him into this small company. And it was the best thing I ever did. And he came to all 4 of the companies that I started.
Wow. Well, that's great. And one, it probably gives you, first of all, when you have somebody to bounce ideas off of and have them be a sounding board, that's obviously provides huge value. But it probably also gave you a lot of confidence to know you got somebody that's on your side that's really helping you navigate the right way and, take the right steps or avoid the wrong steps, I would imagine.
And he would tell me if he didn't agree with it.
Yeah.
I mean, he wouldn't just say, "Oh yeah, you're right," because I was the CEO and he wasn't.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he really would tell me if I was not thinking correctly.
Yeah, and you need
which was
that.
valuable. Yeah, you
Right.
need that.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
definitely need
You don't need people just nodding their head and agreeing. You need people that are gonna give you their real opinion and the real scoop. Absolutely.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really believe that.
Yeah, this is great. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been fantastic. There's a lot more questions I'd love to ask you, and maybe we can get a chance to dive in a little bit deeper, maybe in a part 2 at some point. But and I'll just ask you maybe for a couple of thoughts. As you right now, we're in a very unique time. I think people have learned to some extent how to adapt to a virtual world. But moving forward, in terms of a leader's role, and you may have an entirely virtual organization or an organization that is partially virtual, any tips on how leaders can really adapt to that well, or what the best leaders do in this type of environment where they're not necessarily in a building, in an office space all day like they may have been in the past? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it boils down to communication. That's key. They've got a reputation, which helps in this whole issue when they're doing this, and the fact that they have to be reliable here. This is a reliability factor is key, especially when you're doing it from a strange place or your home. You're not doing it from your office where you're normally or you're used to. I think you have to start thinking outside the box a little bit about how you do those things we talked about earlier and keep your employees happy, but also keep them having a sense of urgency and the rest of those things we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be a daunting task for some people to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be as easy as it was when you were sitting next to them and you could talk to them in person.
But just as you mentioned with those real leaders that impacted you, it comes down to leaving people better than you found them. And when you take a real, genuine, authentic interest in people and helping them do the things that they're capable of doing and reach their potential and find their passions, that's where you develop people, whether they're sitting across from you at a desk or they're across the other side of the country, they're going to be right there with you step in step.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that statement. If it's all goes down to taking an interest and being there for the people when they need you.
Mm-hmm.
I agree totally with what you just said.
Absolutely.
That's key.
Great. Well, we have been here with Howard Berndorf, who is a business consultant at Vision Clinical Research and on the board with Adamas Pharmaceuticals. Tons of leadership experience, tons of business success. Howard, if people want to get more information, or maybe your perspective on leadership, where might they go? How do they get in touch with you?
I have some articles that I put together that I'd be happy to list them and have them available. One that I wrote for Nature about financing years ago, and which is still highly relevant, and a few others that I picked out. And I think there's a place that I can leave them for your audience to get a hold of them. Be happy to do that.
Absolutely. We'll put them in the show notes. So for those of you who are listening and have a chance later, go to the podcast and you'll see in the show notes the links to those articles and any other information we could provide to you. But Howard, this has been great. I enjoy this. Short, but very impactful, valuable insights, and really appreciate your perspective.
John, it was a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us today on today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader. As always, like, share, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. And I greatly appreciate your thoughts and suggestions on future topics as well as future guests. And don't forget to go down below, give a 5-star review. Let us know your thoughts, of course. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. And thanks again, Howard.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.